All right, welcome back to the American Soccer Crash Course. Here with my co-host today, Lodge Dills. Lodge, it feels a little empty in here.
Yeah, we don't have a guest, unfortunately.
No casual fan today. So you're just getting it from the horse's mouth here, and hopefully we'll make things understandable enough, if you will, and really deliver on this episode. So today we're going to be talking about Serginio Dest. He's the player, but in a broader sense, much more importantly, we're going to be talking about the transfer market and how American players have utilized the transfer market, and if that sounds unfamiliar, what the transfer market is.
Yep.
Some opening notes. Would really appreciate if you like and subscribe in the event you're enjoying our podcast. It helps us get the podcast to reach a broader audience.
Puts food on the table for the family of our producer. Let's not forget about that.
That's true. The producer who will not be named.
Will not be named.
And as a reminder, our episodes stay good, remain fresh until the World Cup. The expiration date is November 21st. So the idea is basically if you're tuning in for the first time, you can really start at the beginning and watch all the way through. Occasionally we'll touch on, hey, watch this game or whatever it may be. But 99% of our episode is meant to stay good until the World Cup. So to be watched in that order. And finally, a plug for our YouTube. The producer's been working really hard.
Yeah.
And of course, there's some visual aids in there if that interests you, particularly as we talk about like a player and how a player plays. It's kind of nice to see. If
we have any videos, they're usually on the YouTube as well.
Yeah. It's nice to see little gifs of them playing and whatnot. So just to run through our agenda, we're going to talk about our main man, Serginio Dest. We're going to go over the one big thing, which is the transfer market. We're going to do a brief update on our Americans. We're going to do some vocab. Lodge and you and I are going to be bouncing back on our terms. And then finally, we're going to close by telling you why transfers have been so crucial, or the transfer window has been so crucial for our American players in the past year, and why it's kind of an integral part of their story. So first, we're going to show you this quick clip on Serginio Dest and what he's all about.
Dest is arriving, hurtling forward. Dest! Oh, everything he touches turns to gold. Oh, Dest has scored again. How's this from the 20-year-old of Barcelona?
Serginio is a guy that I describe almost as an artist.
U.S. have the target on their backs. They're right now the top dogs of CONCACAF.
I think it's one of his best qualities, his dribbling, going forward. He can really affect the game for us.
It's another thunderbolt from Serginio Dest.
So yeah, that gives you a little glimpse into what Serginio Dest is all about. I liked the little clips of the flips and tricks and what you will. I think that's a big part of his game. You also may have noticed that banger that was scored by him with the left foot. That was a World Cup qualifying goal and a big one. Probably his best moment with the U.S.
100%.
So today's man is right back Serginio Dest, affectionately nicknamed Serge by the U.S. fan base.
Literally never heard that before. But
You got to be.
Yeah.
For those of us who may have burners that follow exclusively U.S. accounts, search.
You got to be deep on the message boards to see that one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a jump. So Serginio is a 21-year-old from the Netherlands, just outside of Amsterdam. Lodge, over to you.
Yeah. Plays right back. So the right back position, similar to Jedi Robinson, as we touched on in a couple past episodes. He plays left back. Jedi does. Serginio plays just opposite of him on the right side. Something to note about him is, although he is playing on the right side for this, he's ambidextrous with his feet, which is really hard to come by, I would say. Usually players have a dominant foot, but he is a true ambidextrous player in that if Jedi were to be hurt, he would more than likely get subbed on to be the left back, and we would bring somebody on as the right back. I would say similar to, just writing, there's right-footed and left-footed people, and the majority of people are right-footed. So it's really hard to find a good, solid left back or left-footed player. So it probably would just be, as I mentioned, him subbing for Jedi.
So a question that a casual fan might ask here, and I've thought of this question. I've thought how to answer it. It might be a tough one. Why is the left back position traditionally a left foot and the right back traditionally a right-footed player?
Right. I mean, number one, as you're playing, your left back and your right back are usually the only defending players that get up the field, that go ahead and attack as well as defend. And so they're usually people that are most conditioned. But also in soccer, the vast majority of teams over the years have really been focused on playing balls into the box from long outdoors or far out spaces and having large people up top, number 9s, the strikers, to come in and kind of score head goals. So really that's solely so people can play balls into the box. It's much easier to do that. Playing through the middle, it's a little bit more beneficial if you were to be on the opposite side. So if a right-footed player were on the left side, but really just to kind of spread the space out to use the entire field as opposed to kind of tightening it is how I think of it.
Cool, yeah. And so, like, if they were to get into trouble, you want traditionally, if you want to get into trouble, you want to use the dominant foot, right? So, like, without trying to visualize, it would get you in trouble on the outside as opposed to getting you in trouble on the inside, right? And that means that if you turn the ball over, it's more likely to happen on the outside of the field, which is much more dangerous.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
Much less dangerous, but yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Much less dangerous. So, yeah, Dest is really not a conventional right back. He's more of like an offensive defender, which sounds funny, but is really the case. So he's such a good dribbler, as you saw. He's a really good crosser of the ball, which is important, and is even a better thing that he's able to do that. And he really is two-footed, like you said, left and right, can play that right back and left back.
Right.
On the flip side of things, he's not a great defender. He doesn't have great like defending technicals. That's something in his game that like every scout, every journalist knows about him and is saying like, hey, if he wants to really be elite, that's what he's got to work on.
Right.
He's not really like a super physical guy. You may have even seen in the clips. He's relatively short. So he loses a lot of duels, which
a duel for the casual fan out there or somebody who's learning. I think we touched on it, but usually a ball played in the air and two people go up and try to head the ball or win the ball. That's called a duel.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then even if the ball's on the ground and they're fighting for it, that's also considered a duel, right? So so back to Serginio's upbringing. He grew up in Holland, and from a young age, he just like loved the dribbling side, loved the tricks and whatnot. This sounds like complete cap, if I'm being honest, but he claims that like he started out playing and they'd play even teams, and then he got so good where people just didn't want to play with him anymore, and he claims they would play 1-on-10 on the playground.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. No wonder he's so bad at defense. He was definitely getting scored on.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's funny that he is a very offensive defender, mainly because you're starting to see a lot more of them now.
Yeah.
Just with the new way that teams play, it's a lot more attacking as opposed to defending. Just more that I'm going to score more goals than somebody else. Similar to how basketball has evolved, where you have teams like the Warriors now who are just focused on I'm going to score more points than you.
Would you also say, just to interject, would you say like there's some comfort for teams who are like teams like Manchester City on the wall there? They just love keeping the ball. They just like their idea is if we have the ball, then you can't have it, then you can't score. Would you say like a offensively savvy player means that like by playing more offense, you can play more defense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, to an extent. Like other team can't score on you if they don't have the ball, right?
Right.
So unless you're giving it up in bad areas, which a defender definitely can do, you're usually more than likely going to get scored on less. But yeah, kind of going back to that, he was, I mean, usually players that come and play in the right back position or outside back positions played up as wingers as kids. That's where they got their foot skills. I would assume he was probably the same in Holland. Had that technical ability. When we say technical ability, we mean skill level with playing with his feet, usually able to beat somebody on the dribble, skill stuff. But they usually play as wingers where they're able to attack a little bit more. And then when coaches kind of find out that they might not be the best winger, but they still have the ability to cross balls in and a little bit of defensive acumen, that's usually when they're shifted into kind of that right back, left back position, usually at about 15, 16 years old.
Nice. Didn't know that. So Dest was like really when he was 15, 16, he was working his way through the Ajax Amsterdam club, their youth system. So Ajax is a club located in Amsterdam, and it is really the crown jewel of Dutch club football. Like as Serginho put it in his video, all the best players go to Ajax.
Right.
And so Serginho is like largely considered like a character in a pretty goofy, like unique guy kind of way. One of his youth coaches at Ajax, this is a quote from him. He said, "If everyone was wearing a white shirt, he had to wear a different color, or he would just not go to school. Can you imagine? He forgot to go to school." But that's just Serginho.
I don't know if I'd call that goofy. I think that just might call it spacey or something like that. But
that's a little bit of a space cadet vibe to him, dude. Like, also just that quote, he forgot to go to school. I feel like he knew school was going on.
100%.
It was more of a conscious choice.
Yeah.
But just 2 incidents to describe that quirkiness. He allegedly strictly eats baguettes.
I've heard that. I've heard that. Yeah, he got Messi on that.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Wow.
We'll be talking about, how the fact that he played with Messi later, but Messi ate baguettes before game because Serginho started doing it. Yeah.
So Messi, who's the greatest player of all time, probably played 16 plus years.
According to this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't quote us. That was the missing piece for Messi.
Yeah.
That'll vault him over Ronaldo once and for all. Apparently, like when he gets roasted for it, he doesn't speak like. He doesn't have like his English is decent, I would say, but his response is "carb up, bro," in his Dutch accent that I'm not going to attempt. And then the other like classic Dest moment was, as we mentioned, he played with Messi, and Messi was leaving FC Barcelona, the team that he was at since he was 15 years old. And so Messi's crying. Messi's family's in the front row. They're crying. Everyone's dressed to the nines. It's a dramatic occasion. Pans to like a section of all the players. Serginio Dest is decked out in what looks like a Chicago Bulls like full jersey, and the story would come out later that he didn't realize that Messi's farewell was that day, and he was at the beach.
Oh, yeah, that's
as you do.
Honestly, maybe he just is like goofy. Like he's just a funny guy.
Yeah.
Did it at school. Did it for Messi's farewell tour. Damn.
Yeah, to get like more of a glimpse, his teammate Brendan Aronson said, "That guy can never show up on time for anything," in an endearing way. But for a little like explain in NBA terms, I guess this would be like if D'Angelo Russell showed up to Kobe's farewell and he was wearing a like full Messi jersey.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's,
I mean, I bet you probably understood that one when I told it, but
it was good. That was good.
Yeah, Lodge, you want to tell us a little bit about his kind of national team story?
Sure. So, similar to a couple different players, as we mentioned, he is a dual national player in that he was kind of growing up in Netherlands, and so he had the ability to play for the Dutch national team. At 19 years old, he really wasn't getting any attention from that Dutch national team. They're usually one of the powerhouses in European football, which is great soccer, and there's going to be a lot of competition in those teams. And what actually Greg Berhalter did, the coach of the U.S. men's national team, as we mentioned him before, is he started to recruit him. One thing that you'll kind of find out is over time, a lot of the U.S. players in the past have been recruited from Europe to come play for us because they have the ability to do so, dual nationality. Greg Berhalter, I think this is one of his marquee signings, if you will, if you could consider it signing in a national team. But Dest accepted largely due to his how the U.S. was trending at that time. So we were kind of coming up. We had just missed the last World Cup. He had the ability to kind of come into a team, play a major role from a very early time, and he thought, this is something that could kind of kickstart my career and kind of help him progress as a player as well.
Yeah. To explain in college football terms, you can think of it like good recruit growing up in Alabama.
Yeah.
And like maybe he's waiting for Nick Saban to call, but then James Franklin calls at Penn State or somewhere a little bit step below, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. I can play a big role here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That one works. So after his initial success at Ajax, Serginho was ready for the next step in his career. We're going to touch on that in a little bit. To kind of break up from the content here, we're going to give you a little bit more content, but in a different way for something completely different. So we're going to go and do
now
Americans
for something completely
different.
Fire.
Yeah. Christian, you want to start us off here?
Yeah. So the American kind of update the past week. Today we're filming on Wednesday. Today and yesterday, 7 Americans started in the kind of Champions League match day, as they call it. A match day is like
Clap it up.
Yeah, there we go.
It's a lot.
Little vocab. Match day like refers to like how you might say week 8 in the NFL. Very similar to that.
Yeah.
And so within the match day 5 of the Champions League, 7 Americans started, which was the most ever. So kind of it's not like no one's going crazy over it, but just another cool fact showing.
Yeah.
Hey, this podcast that we made about the Americans being good, it's real.
Yeah.
There's some numbers and evidence.
Yeah.
Going into some of those starters, Pulisic had a game-winning assist, and Weston McKennie scored a goal for Juventus.
Yeah. Despite the loss, but
yeah, they lost there. Over to you, Lodge.
Yeah. Additionally, French legend Thierry Henry. We're not probably going to be talking about a ton of legends here, but Thierry said on CBS he runs kind of the Golazo show, he's one of the pundits during the Golazo show, which is their version of Red Zone. Said that this generation of the U.S. men's national team players is softer than kind of the last golden generation for us, which included players such as Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey. If you don't know those names, don't worry. We'll probably get to that further in a different episode.
Sure. And those dudes are tough.
Those dudes are tough.
Yeah.
We were known for our grit back in those days. There were grit games for sure. But additionally, he also said that Pulisic assist wasn't an assist, which is kind of something I don't really know.
I'm ready to sound off on Thierry. Right. It's been boiling.
Yeah. Let's hear it, Christian.
All right. So a few weeks ago, Thierry had this sound bite that went viral. And okay, so context, this dude's like one of the greatest of all time. Like he might be like Kobe is like a good reference point.
It's like when you have NBA Tonight or TNT and you have Shaq and Charles Barkley. He's not with players at Charles Barkley's level, but he would be the Shaq in this, for instance.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And so on CBS, they like to really engage the American audience, ask about American players. Some USA fans were saying hashtag free Pulisic because he hadn't been getting playing time. So Thierry had a nice, eloquent soundbite where he was like, yeah, well, Pulisic's got to free himself. He's got to prove it. I liked it. It was all good.
Yeah.
But his ego got stroked, and then he kept going after Pulisic, and he got increasingly unfair. And he said, yeah, well, it's clear all his coaches never have trusted him because of the way he hasn't played. Which was like, okay, well, he hasn't played, but there's not evidence for the first part of that.
Sure.
And then the culmination of this was finally today, Pulisic gets an assist, which was a great goal.
It was.
And Thierry Henry says it's not an assist, which that's not how that works in the slightest.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know about that one.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I feel like he's one of those people where he probably saw a couple different games and he'd been hearing all this stuff about him. He's like, all the Americans are in my ear all the time. Pulisic this, Pulisic that. And he felt like he had to take him down a peg, and now it's just like he has an agenda and he needs to stick to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly how I feel about it. And we joke about Pulisic being the LeBron James of soccer. If that's the case, I think If that's the case, I think Thierry Henry is the Skip Bayless of soccer because he's just unreasonably going after Pulisic for everything now. And what's evident to me, and like we said, those old generation of USA players, those dudes were gritty, they were tough, and they punched way above their weight in terms of the success that they had. But it's clear to me that Thierry Henry has not watched a single game of the U.S. men's national team.
Probably.
It hasn't always been the smoothest ride, but there have been some serious moments where they have proved that they're gutsy.
Right.
Those 2 finals against Mexico that they won in the last minutes of the game when Mexico was this big bad team to them that was continually beating them up. Those were extremely ballsy.
We had talked all about the man in the mirror and how the whole landscape of U.S. men's soccer was about how we were kind of matching ourselves up against Mexico, and now Mexico's matching themselves up against us. Like, there's definitely been that shift, and I don't think he was totally aware of that when he was making this statement. But
just a guy sitting on his big career, just throwing takes at a wall. So that certainly fired me up. I guess this next one that makes me a little bit sad is that American coach Jesse Marsh. Everyone's comparing him to Ted Lasso because I guess so. But he's like the one American coach in the Premier League. He coaches Leeds United. Two of our players are on there on Leeds United. In the
Tyler
Premier League.
Adams and Brendan Aronson. There'll be episodes on them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's been struggling of late. I don't think his team's particularly good, so I think he's got a really tough job. But when you're in the relegation zone, you're always a threat to get fired. So
Right.
I would say he's got one game left this weekend in the Premier League to really stake his claim and stay with the job.
And just for the casual out there that hadn't watched one of our last episodes, relegation is you get dropped down to the lower division. So that comes with a lot of financial implications. So it's definitely you can get fired for cause pretty quickly in the Premier League.
Even if they probably like you and feel like they just got to do something. So, yeah, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll get back to our big thing, which is the transfer market. So stick around. So, yeah, welcome back. Getting back to today's big thing. We're talking about the transfer market, a term that you will become familiar with and how it's different from American sports, how players move teams and clubs is different. And we're going to talk about both how those procedural elements of the transfer market as well as like the objectives within the transfer market are different from American sports.
Sure.
So to kind of put it all under the same umbrella, the transfer market consists of like the functional systems that in American sports you would think of trading players, free agency, and drafting players, all under the same umbrella of this transfer market. Lodge, over to you.
Yeah. Specifically, the transfer market operates kind of during two major points, the summer window and the winter window. The summer window takes place pretty much right after the last game of the season. Teams can start to kind of open it up, usually around like June, July time, and closes when the first games begin, usually about a game or two in, I want to say.
Yeah.
Like late August, early September. I think it's end of August. And then the January transfer window is the other big one. So the entire month of January, teams can make transfers midway through the season. If injuries come about, if they need a new player, if something isn't working, if you get a new coach, there's a myriad of reasons why.
Yeah.
You used my thesaurus today, by the way.
Nice. Attaboy. Yeah. So like we just talked about that coach potentially getting fired. Leeds need like pieces if they want to not stay relegated. So I expect them to be spending some money during the January transfer window.
Splashing some cash for sure.
Exactly, right in the middle of their season. So,
kind of one way to look about it, or kind of comparing it to trades specifically, trades are two-way, so player for player, like for like. Transfers are one-way, so it is always player for compensation. There have been cases where they throw somebody on, like just kind of a non-starter. They don't usually do player swaps of any sort.
Yeah.
But some players are usually thrown into the mix every once in a while, but it's usually always just cash consideration. A lot of teams are actually known for, as we mentioned, Ajax specifically, academies, and so they kind of bring players up and get them to a point where they're ready to transfer, and then they make the big money moves, and that's how the teams kind of make their revenue.
Yeah. And Lodge, just philosophical question: why would a team be open to that? Why would they be like, okay, I'll just kind of let my assets go? Like, what are they trying to accomplish?
Really, what they're trying to accomplish is to keep the club afloat.
Yeah.
If they're in a smaller league where they're not going to be competing for large amounts of money that way, so specifically like getting into the Champions League and actually going about winning it, Ajax usually will win the Dutch league, Eredivisie, the Netherlands league, but they're not making a lot of money on that, and so the biggest way for them to kind of make money is through their academy, through developing players, selling them for vast amounts of cash.
Nice. Yeah, and like you said, it's cash considerations for a player, but one thing a lot of people don't realize about soccer is it's actually like you're not just buying the player and taking his contract in like you would a trade, like in American sports you trade a player, and now that his contract that already existed is now yours. In soccer, that contract almost always gets ripped up, and it's a matter of signing a whole new contract with your new team.
That's a good point, yeah. And sometimes, there's been extreme cases where they haven't actually been able to find, a deal. They aren't able to strike a deal with that player afterwards, and so it's just kind of like the player sits out for a little bit, and then they kind of let him just go.
Yeah,
it's pretty weird. They buy rights for. Yeah, they really just buy rights to have the contract be on the table for them.
Yeah, and so it's even funny, like sometimes a player will like get ahead of it and even just get all his like personal contract details out of the way before the actual transaction between teams even happens. So just to give you an example of what this looks like in practice, Christian Pulisic plays for Borussia Dortmund. Chelsea pay Borussia Dortmund $57 million to do the conversion. And that's just the initial fee to his rights, and then they sign him to whatever Pulisic makes. I want to say maybe it's $10 million a year or something like that. So to kind of continue the functionalities of the transfer market, comparing it to how the draft works in American sports.
Sure.
Of course, there is no draft in soccer, not how it works. There's no college system.
In the European leagues and the MLS, there is a draft. Let's be clear there.
Yes, true. And so maybe one kind of draft functionality is that clubs have in-house academies, like we talked about Serginio Dest.
Right.
You can think of it almost like club-sponsored AAU teams that go down the ladder. So like if there was a Chicago Bulls U10 team, it's like it's sort of like that, but just soccer. A little tidbit: if you've ever seen Tottenham Hotspur fans sing, they have a song for their star player.
Tottenham Hotspur is Christian's favorite Premier League team. Just throwing it out there for those of you who don't know who the club is.
Yeah, and they sing their best player is Harry Kane, and they sing Harry Kane, he's one of our own. And the reference there to the fact that Harry Kane is actually came up in their academy, and so they feel like he's truly one of them because of that. And so in addition to that, academies, I would say like academy players, it's kind of hit or miss. You know, just like any kid in any sport, anywhere, you're gonna eventually fade out for the vast majority of people. And so the rest of the young talent that a club acquires is through the transfer market. And so a lot of times we talked about Ajax and how they sell their players. A bigger club like, say, Chelsea will go into the transfer market and buy players. I mean, Christian Pulisic was a great example of that. They got him at like 19 years old. It's a little bit akin to really just drafting him. Right? Like he's unproven, and a lot of that big fee is not what you're going to get tomorrow. It's we're paying and investing in him for the future, and that's like the future value of his cash flows, if you will.
100%.
And so also like very similar to just the equivalent of baseball prospects.
Continuing on, kind of another comparison that we wanted to throw out is free agency. So really similar to how it kind of is now in the NBA, players do definitely have a little bit more autonomy compared to teams. They have the ability to go out and say, kind of threaten to not come onto the pitch. It was actually something that happened this week with Ronaldo, where he walked off a little bit before he should have been. Players kind of just throw a fit to become a diva to get moves that they want to if they're not enjoying it.
There's lots of divas out there. Like you and I, we maintain honesty. There's some serious divas in soccer.
100%. We have a little bit of a problem going on upstairs.
This
Somebody
podcast
seems to be making
is too fucking
chickens.
fire.
Yeah.
The alarm just went off.
We're going to take a short break here and come right back. All right, sorry for that little interlude. One of my roommates, Jack, was making some chicken. Jack's famous chicken. Check it out.
Shout out to Jack.
Shout out to Jack. But kind of back to what I was talking about specifically with free agency. I forget what incessant rambling I was going on and talking about. But just to recap, players definitely have a little bit of power and mobility, similar to American sports. I would say players are definitely divas. We're not going to lie about that, I think, as Christian mentioned. It's becoming more and more commonplace for things like that. Additionally, clubs like to get players on a contract to kind of ensure that they are paid for the rights to the player when they're on sale. So a lot of times you'll see teams lock up big players for 3 to 4 year contracts, knowing that they're not going to keep that player for that long if they start performing well, so that they can still make money on the sale of that player. There aren't usually a lot of big name players that leave specifically with just when they become free agents.
Yeah. So nail on the head there, I would say. And there are free agents, but like you said, it almost feels sort of rare because of the way clubs love to just lock them up.
100%.
We're gonna get into vocab. Nobody to grill here today, sadly, but we're gonna still deliver it. Just want to tell you quickly, as we have before, about the Paul Farrington Show. Great spot for NFL, football as a whole, and gambling on both of those topics. Check out the Paul Farrington Show. It's on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, and you can certainly find it looking through our Instagram on our podcast. So. transfer vocab, lots of terms that get flown around during those the summer window and the winter window. So let's go over a few. So what does not in my plans mean? If a coach says the player's not in my plans.
Yeah. If a player's not in a coach's plans, that means usually one of two things. A, the coach just came in, and so he's relatively new, and he wants to kind of institute a new scheme, and he doesn't think that player fits that scheme, and so he says he's not in that plan, not in my plans, which usually means he's up for other teams to bid on. The player is going to be sold. Or what it means is the player has performed poorly or has done something against the team, and the player then becomes not in the coach's plans. Second one, Christian, I think we're just going to go back and forth here.
Yeah.
Probably the best way to do it. Record signing.
Yeah, so record signing is when a club buys a player and it's the most money they've ever spent buying a player. So it's their signing and it's the record amount, the record fee that they have to pay for him. Lodge release clause?
Yeah. Release clause is usually the number that a team has to go up to in order to have the rights to that player. So the better a player is, the more money that a team has to spend on them. It's kind of written into the contract. If you want to have the ability to talk to a player that's not on your team, you have to pay this amount of money, and then you're able to kind of pay the release clause, and it releases that player from that contract, and then you can go ahead and put a contract on them.
So to give an example of that, like Erling Haaland, who played for Dortmund and now plays for Man City, his agents knew that they didn't want to play for Dortmund forever, sadly for some of us fans of Dortmund.
Yeah.
And so they were like, hey, in that contract, we want a release clause of $50 million so that one day a guy like Man City over there can go and purchase him. And it's just a matter of them paying the posted cost, and he's theirs.
There are some stupid ones out there. There's been 500 million euro release clauses. There's been €1 billion release clauses. Really, what that means is the player isn't for sale unless the club decides that they want him to be for sale.
Yeah.
It's usually with like boyhood players, really young people coming up, and they're like, we want to lock you in for a bunch of years. And the player's like, obviously, this is my dream club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless Saudi Arabia wants to throw some chump change around.
Right. That's a good point.
That hasn't actually happened, but who knows? A swap deal. Or did I just steal your thunder?
No, you're good. Swap deal usually is, I think as we mentioned, player for player?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're relatively rare occurrences, as I mentioned before. But sometimes, example, Manchester City, the team right behind me in the baby blue, did a swap deal plus a little bit of cash for one of the players on Juventus. And so they actually just swapped right backs. It was kind of funny, as we're mentioning now, right backs.
Pretty bizarre.
Yeah. Really just kind of the schemes both players played in. The coaches wanted the other player, and it worked out perfectly for both teams. You're not going to see that very often, though. Christian, what is a deadline day signing?
Yeah, this one might be a little bit self-explanatory, but deadline day, just like we have in American sports, is like the trade deadline. It is the deadline for which you can sign a new player. And so many times, just like in American sports, it comes down to the wire, and you get a midnight on deadline date signing that is a big deal for your team. Who is Fabrizio Romano, and what is the saying? Here we go.
Yeah. So Fabrizio Romano is soccer's version of Woj. His soccer's version of who's another guy? Adam Schefter.
Yeah.
Where he's pretty cool, and people know him by name. I wouldn't say Woj is that cool, but he has like. Woj's signature is kind of a Woj bomb, as you see. He'll drop a tweet. Fabrizio's signature is "Here we go." Whenever he says "Here we go," that means that the transfer is signed, sealed, delivered. It's happening. There are a lot of people out there with a lot of accounts talking about transfer rumors in soccer specifically, whether that be bots, whether that be the Daily Mail, whether it be like just other people like that.
Ronaldo news.
Yeah, but Fabrizio's. I don't think he's ever been wrong when he's thrown out a "Here we go." It's ironclad, as you would say.
Yep, he is as good as it gets.
Christian, going back to you, what is a loan with an obligation to buy or an option to buy?
Yeah, so a loan is a unique item in soccer where a player can actually move to a different team but still be owned by a parent team. So as we've talked about, soccer's a lot of the haves and the have-nots. And so teams like Chelsea can have a bajillion like academy players, right? And so it can benefit them to get those players playing time, just not within Chelsea. So they'll send them to other teams, and that'll be like a loan. All right, so coming off our vocab lesson there, we just want to emphasize why the hell we're talking about this.
Sure.
We don't. There's soccer is a big wide world. We love it, but you're not here to learn soccer. You're here to get prepped for the World Cup. So, why is the transfer market, which takes place all at club level, so integral for understanding the USMNT, the U.S. Men's National Team? Well, the transfer market can do a multitude of things for a player. It can help a player take a step to a more competitive team or league. It can help a player get more playing time or get a more important role, bigger role on a team. It can help a player who's in an organization who isn't going to get minutes and just wants to get minutes but wants to remain in that organization via the loan system that we described. And finally, it can help a player who's playing on a team, but that team's getting relegated, so he's got to find a new home, so to speak. And so in 2021, right after the Christian Pulisic wave we've talked about, there were 54 Americans playing in Europe. But very few were in like really good situations. Most instead were like in situations where maybe they were coming off injuries or they were the first man up, but no one was like a lockdown starter in a really competitive situation. Some of them were even starters in, say, the Dutch league or Portugal or whatever it may be, but not super lockdown ones, or super competitive leagues rather. So in summer of 2022, Americans started taking care of their business. They started moving to places that would really set them up great for the World Cup, because that is the dream of every player. It's the reason we have a podcast here. It's the pinnacle of soccer. And everyone wants to be in the best position they can possibly be. So telling the story of this team, it's essential to tell the story of their transfers and how that has really been a big part.
Yeah, now, just to kind of build off of that, it's not just players on the U.S. men's team, but players across international stage. You know, there are players who just try to get a move, to show that they can, make a position, play different positions, that they have a different style to what they're showing in their club level. There are players who just aren't even, as you said, getting consistent minutes, and they want to show that they still have, that. There are older players who are starting to be in the twilight of their careers, but want to make kind of one last run at it, and so they go somewhere, maybe in their home country where they might think they get better looks at. A lot of players have started to do that more and more frequently these days.
For sure. And of the, just talking about the U.S. again, of their 26-man roster, it's like 12 of them made a move in the past year, which is crazy.
I didn't even know that, yeah.
Yeah, like almost 50%. So it's been a big dominating story. And so I'd like to just tell a little bit about the Serginio Dest story, which is so bizarre. So he was at Ajax, made his way up through Ajax, played for their best team in the Netherlands, which, like we said, is a decent league but not a great league.
Sure.
So he was ready for his next step. And in summer 2020, Barcelona came calling, one of the biggest clubs in the world, the club of Messi. And so they paid Ajax 21 million euros and 5 million in variable add-on charges. So to tell you just what...
Yeah, I was going to say add-on. We didn't touch about that in our vocab, but add-on is really incentive-based contracts. So, how good the player does. So for... amount of minutes that he's going to play, it's kind of built in. If he hits a certain number, then they start paying a little bit more. For strikers, it's goals. For defenders, it's clean sheets, so not giving up any goals, things like that are really incentive-based. And it's kind of like if the player is starting to play a little bit better, we deserve a little bit better compensation in terms of it.
Yeah. And so that 21 million with the option to rise up to 26 depending on Dest's performance. And so they signed him to a 5-year contract where he would make 5 million euros a year. Again, kind of as we talked about earlier, you pay for potential with young players.
Yeah.
So he was making only 5 million, but they paid 26 for him. So that was baked in there. To explain in NFL terms, kind of just like a rookie deal. For a new draft pick.
There are guys making ton more money on that Barcelona team now. They have probably the biggest wage bill in the world, if I had to guess, or at least somewhere near the top. But yeah, he was definitely just one of the more inexperienced players, and that was I would say, stimulus check for Barcelona. So
yeah, so tell us a little bit about. You could do a whole podcast on Barcelona's financial situation, but tell us a little bit about Serginho's first couple seasons at Barca and how that financial situation kind of came to play a little bit of a role.
So this was a time, really, I think Weston was the only one to ever play with superstar when Weston McKennie played with Ronaldo, but he got a chance to play with Messi, Serginio Dest did, and that's something that really just kind of brought a lot more fans and realized, like, wow, we're actually on the main stage as a national team. It was pretty cool to see him, like, sharing a side with Messi. Messi would sometimes play right wing, and so the right back, right wing, or left wing when Serginio would play left back sometimes. So it was really cool to see that. Additionally, you know, he did all right for 2 seasons, I would say.
Yeah.
But really, it wasn't anything spectacular. There were glimpses, but he was really kind of ostracized a little bit when they brought in their new coach. The new coach was Xavi, former Barcelona player, really kind of he personified the style that they were trying to play, I would say. Yeah. A lot of tiki-taka, which is another term meaning kind of possession-based soccer. So a lot of possession really has 80 to 90% of the time they're holding the ball, whether that be in their half or the opponents, but really just kind of waiting for a team, breaking them down, seeing how that. It wasn't that Serginho couldn't necessarily do it, but Barcelona started to have some pretty big financial problems.
Yeah, and so Xavi kind of hit him with a "you're not in my plans."
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And just quickly to build back on what you were saying about his stint at Barcelona, there was like a very short window of time for Serginho where the U.S. men's national team got him through Greg Berhalter, as you had mentioned, one of the big gets, and then suddenly he was playing for Barcelona. So we went from not even having this guy on our radar, so to speak, to oh my gosh, he's playing next to Messi all the time.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So yeah, like we said, but Barcelona was financially in ruin. A lot of that had to do with COVID, and then a lot also had to do with their own decisions. But and Xavi was just not interested anymore, and so Barcelona started engaging in some really messed up like practices where with some of these players they no longer wanted, which Dest was a part of that category. They were like, yeah, you know, we looked at your contract and actually it's invalid. Our lawyers took a look and we shouldn't even be paying you. And so they were just bullying, telling people they had to take huge pay cuts.
Yeah, there's currently one player who's still there that kind of sat through all the bully ball. Frankie de Jong, a Dutch player.
His fiance is Lodge's favorite wife and girlfriend in football.
Beautiful woman, Mickey Kimeni, if you've ever heard of her.
This would be a great time for just a little visual. This is why we watch on YouTube.
Yeah. We'll tell the producer to put something up there. Maybe a little tag on her Instagram on the bottom. MIKKYKIEMENEY. Maybe I think. If anybody's interested.
The language barrier didn't trip you up there.
No, I got that. But crazy about Frankie is, I think he's still owed 20 million euros in wages. Like they just haven't paid him, and they said, in order to be a Barca player, like we need you to take a pay cut. And he's like,
it's about the way.
Yeah, and he's like, no, like you brought me in for a disgusting amount of money, and you're paying everybody else. You're just not paying me just to try to force a move. So a little bit difficult for him. But back to Dest. Dest was put to the sword. Not allowed to practice with the team, really just kind of not in the plans, as we mentioned with Xavi. And a picture surfaced of him where he was training with cones in a dark hallway.
Yeah, so like, sorry, if you haven't figured out, we have notes here.
Yeah,
so they're like during the game, Dest is a goofy character, as we said, and he's put like just like anybody would at the gym, he's like grinding, and it's like him in this like dark alley, like he's in like the sunken place or something, and it's like inside the stadium at Barcelona, and it was posted during a game, and there's like 3 cones. It was the weirdest thing. Goofy guy, but they were essentially like, you can't even watch the freaking game, you gotta go train with these cones in a dark alley. It's even a picture, it's hard to explain, but it just a testament to how out of favor and just out of the plans he was. And so Dest's name, as they do in the tabloids, particularly the British tabloids, was getting floated around everywhere to where he might land. And eventually on deadline day, he reached a deal with the Italian champions, AC Milan. He's got some really cool teams on his resume.
Amsterdam, Barcelona, and now Milan as the 3 destination points as a really young kid. Pretty cool.
Not bad. Not bad. And so what that deal looked like, Fabrizio Romano announced it. He said, here we go. It was a loan deal, 1-year loan, which meant Barcelona still technically owns the rights to him. But after this year, AC Milan gets an option to buy him, meaning that if they like what they see, they can sign him to a 4-year deal, and they would pay Barcelona $20 million once they sign that 4-year contract. So Serginio Dest, we wanted to tell you the story about him today because he's hit all the boxes in terms of these little the functions of the transfer market, right? He took his game to another level with the transfer market. And he got out of a bad situation with the transfer market, and his deal even includes some cute little bells and whistles that we talked about in terms of an option to buy.
He is really the best player that we could have thrown in here. That's good job by the producer.
Yeah, the producer to not be named, who may not exist. Awesome job. So he really utilized the power to get out of a toxic situation, and he started to really grasp his opportunity. He's getting playing time recently.
Sure.
A little what to watch, a little homework for our viewers at home. We just started it at the beginning of this video, but the Destined is a 7-minute documentary on YouTube, just outlining Serginio Dest, his journey to the national team, and sort of where he, just the origins of his football story, if you will. Cool. And Lodge, just to wrap it up with a little bet tip. Do we endorse gambling on this podcast? I can't remember.
Well, I think the producer's motioning to me to say no, we don't endorse bank gambling, but we're just going to throw out a couple betting tips for those of you that are interested. 2 players that are specifically on the U.S. men's team are playing this weekend. Saturday at 2:45, we have Lease versus Juventus. Juventus has Weston McKennie, as we mentioned in the last episode. And then on Sunday at 3:45, Torino versus AC Milan. AC Milan obviously hosting Serginio Dest, the player that we talked about today. So, Christian, really quickly, do you want to go through your kind of tips for the game or what you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I got Juventus winning 2-0 because I think they're going to bounce back from a really poor showing. And then I got Milan tying Torino. Both teams have been hot. I think they go in and duke it out, but nothing serious happens. So Juventus plays Saturday at 2:45 on Paramount Plus. And Milan plays Sunday at 3:45 on Paramount Plus. I believe that's actually I believe we're getting an extra hour of sleep this weekend or something. I think that's what that is.
Yeah.
So look out for those. Thank you for watching tonight. This was a fun podcast to do here. We didn't miss a third too bad. I thought thought things went pretty smoothly. So hope you learned a little bit more about the transfer market, about Serginio Dest, the trickster of the U.S. men's national team, and maybe next time you go work out, you'll just quickly eat a baguette. Carb up, bro.
Carb up, bro.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.